The Galactic Council howled with mocking laughter as Admiral Philip Richardson presented humanity's pitiful excuse for a war fleet. Orin, the Trill ambassador, slammed his fist on the steel podium. "These rusted scrap heaps are your warships? Any civilized race junked this obsolete junk centuries ago. Your fleet belongs in a museum, not in space. I can't believe you primitive apes wasted our time, dragging us here to laugh at your technological inferiority. You'll be effortless to conquer." Orin smirked as he gestured to the sensor readouts of the human ships in orbit. The readings showed no modern shields, weapons, engines, nothing. Just what looked like a cluster of ancient, defenseless relics. Raucous laughter echoed through the council chamber as delegate after delegate piled on, ridiculing humanity's backwardness. Blue-skinned Zorgax pointed at the readouts, guffawing, while tentacled Cephalons shrieked in amusement. Richardson stood stoically, fists clenched, teeth gritted, refusing to take the bait. Enough of this. He silently tapped a code into his communicator, sending a terse two-word command to his ships. "Commence maneuver." Suddenly alarm klaxons blared. The deriding laughter died as new sensor readings flashed, showing an impossibility. The human ships accelerating to insane velocities, far exceeding light speed. "Ships have entered hyperspace jump," a Trill operator said in disbelief. "By the mother of moons, that's impossible. No ships that primitive could ever—" Orin whirled to the readouts in shock. The human ships had vanished, jumped to hyperspace, bypassing the light barrier. Something every galactic race knew was utterly unfeasible for such crude, basic vessels. It defied physics. Chaos erupted in the council chamber as the aliens descended into stunned pandemonium. Never underestimate humanity. We may not have your tech, but we have the ingenuity to forge our own path. You were fools to try and push us around. Admiral Richardson stared down the shocked delegates. Orin leapt up, face flushed with rage. "This changes nothing. The Trill do not fear you and will not be intimidated. This means war." Richardson locked eyes with Orin, his voice low and resolute. "War it is, then." He turned on his heel and strode confidently out. Humanity had just shattered every notion of their technological inferiority, and if their revolutionary hyperspace jump was any indication, the aliens were in for many more nasty surprises. The Council had made a grave mistake. They had no idea what humanity was truly capable of, but they were about to find out. Several months earlier, deep within the bowels of the human flagship, Admiral Richardson convened an emergency meeting with his senior staff. A holographic display flickered to life, casting an eerie blue glow over the officers' faces. Richardson gestured to the display. "Our intelligence networks have uncovered alarming developments. The Trill have been constructing this monstrosity in blatant violation of Galactic Council weapons treaties." The display showed a gargantuan cannon-like structure, easily dwarfing the largest Trill warships. Gasps echoed around the room. Captain Amelia Chen, Richardson's second-in-command, leaned forward. "My God, our analysts believe it's an ultra-long-range mass driver. That thing could accelerate a slug to a fraction of light speed. It could shatter planets from across a star system." Commander Olivia Dubois raised a hand. "Hold on, we can't just go off half-cocked. This is serious, but it's not doomsday. We have options." The debate raged, voices rising, tempers flaring. Richardson listened, his face an inscrutable mask. Finally, he raised a hand, silencing the room. "Here's what we're going to do. We're sending in a covert ops team to infiltrate the Trill base and destroy that thing. Commander Red, you'll lead the mission. Hand-pick your best people. You ship out in 24 hours. The scene shifted to a barren, pockmarked moon, the Trill research facility squatting on its surface like a malevolent tumor. Red and his team moved silently through the vacuum, the starlight glinting off their black stealth armor. They breached the perimeter with ease, slipping past automated defenses and sleepy guards. As they crept through the dimly lit corridors, they placed explosive charges at critical junctures, each one a promise of fiery destruction. Finally, they entered the cavernous chamber housing the mass driver. It was a behemoth, a mountain of metal and circuitry that seemed to swallow the light. Red knelt to place the final charge when suddenly, alarms shrieked to life. Hidden sensors had detected their intrusion. "Shit!" Red hissed into his comm. "We've been made! Defensive positions now!" Drill soldiers flooded into the chamber, energy rifles blazing. The humans dove for cover, returning fire. The air crackled with deadly energy bolts and the stench of ozone. Private Jinshan took a shot to the chest, his armor slagging. He collapsed, blood bubbling from his mouth. Sergeant Ava Romero caught a bolt in the thigh, the flesh charring. She gritted her teeth and kept shooting. A vicious-looking Trill colonel strode into the chamber, barking orders. Corporal Mike Harson, blood streaming down his face from a head wound, suddenly broke from cover. He charged straight at the colonel, firing from the hip, a wordless battle cry tearing from his throat. The colonel cut him down with a precise headshot, but Harson's charge bought Red the seconds he needed. He primed the final charge and yelled, "Charge is set! Fall back! Fall back!" The humans beat a desperate fighting retreat, energy bolts sizzling past their heads. The Trill colonel screamed for the mass driver to fire, desperate to vaporize the saboteurs. Red and his battered team barely made it to minimum safe distance when a sun-bright explosion consumed the facility. The mass driver, the colonel, the entire base, all were atomized in a maelstrom of light and fury. On Richardson's flagship, recon drones showed the devastation, a pillar of molten debris punching into space from the moon's tortured surface. Red's voice crackled over the comm. "Package delivered, sir." Richardson's face was stone. "Well done, Commander, but this is only the beginning. They'll be out for blood now." The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with a thunderous din, tension crackling through the air like a live wire. Orin, the Trill ambassador, stood at the center of the maelstrom, his face a mask of cold fury. With a flick of his wrist, he activated a holographic display, casting the destruction of the Trill research facility in stark relief. "This," he snarled, finger jabbing at the flickering carnage, "is the handiwork of the humans. An unprovoked act of savage aggression against a peaceful Trill research station. This cannot stand. I demand the Council authorize an immediate punitive strike against Earth to bring these violent primitives to heel." Ambassador Richardson rose from his seat, his face an implacable mask of stone. "The only aggression here," he said, his voice carrying through the chamber like a thunderclap, "is the Trill's flagrant violation of Galactic Council weapons treaties." He activated his own display, showing schematics and surveillance footage of the Trill's monstrous mass driver cannon. "This weapon represents an existential threat to Earth and every other species in the galaxy. Our strike was not aggression, but a justified act of self-defense in the face of Trill militarism." The chamber erupted into a cacophony of shouting and accusations, delegates leaping to their feet, gesticulating wildly. Orin and Richardson stared each other down, eyes locked, neither willing to give an inch. Amidst the pandemonium, a willowy, zephyry delegate floated forward, her melodic voice somehow cutting through the din. "Esteemed colleagues," she trilled, "I propose a compromise. Let us dispatch a joint Council Human Task Force to inspect the Trill facility directly. Let the evidence speak for itself." Orin's face contorted in objection, but a quick vote saw him overruled. Richardson allowed himself a small, grim smile. The truth would out. The scene shifted. A sleek Council shuttle knifing through the void, the ruined husk of the Trill research base looming ahead. A phalanx of human fighters escorted the diplomatic vessel, weapons primed. As the shuttle settled onto a scorched landing pad, its hatch hissed open, disgorging Ambassador Richardson and a cohort of Council delegates, Orin among them, seething with barely suppressed rage. Commander Red and his battle-hardened Marines stood waiting, forming a perimeter around the dignitaries. Richardson nodded to Red, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. As the delegates picked their way through the twisted wreckage, even Orin could not deny the evidence of the mass driver's existence, the half-melted remnants of the gargantuan barrel jutting from the rubble like the bones of some prehistoric beast. Richardson was about to proclaim vindication when Red's comm crackled to life. "Sir," a Marine's voice hissed, "we've got a cloaked Trill ship touching down on the far side of the facility. Orders?" Richardson's eyes narrowed. "Investigate, Commander. I smell treachery afoot." Red and his Marines stormed across the pitted surface, weapons at the ready. As they approached the cloaked ship, a hatch slid open, and all hell broke loose. A hail of blaster fire ripped from the vessel as elite Trill commandos poured out, all black armor and lethal grace. The Marines dove for cover, returning fire. Plasma bolts crisscrossed the vacuum, slagging armor, boiling blood. Screams of the dying filled the comms as the two forces clashed in vicious close-quarters combat. Red ducked as a commando's shot sizzled past his helmet, dropping the Trill with a well-placed burst to the chest. All around him, humans and Trill grappled and died, neither side asking nor giving quarter. In the end, Red and his Marines stood victorious, but at a terrible cost. As they stormed the Trill ship, they found its computer core wiped clean, all data purged. Back at the landing site, Richardson and Orin stared each other down, accusations flying like daggers. "Her pitiful attempt to cover your tracks," Richardson spat, "destroying evidence of your crimes." "Crimes?" Orin snarled. "The only crime here is your clumsy attempt to frame us by planting false evidence." As the two diplomats traded barbs, a ashen-faced council aide pulled Richardson aside. "Sir," the aide whispered, "Council intelligence has intercepted Trill communications. They're preparing a massive retaliatory strike against human colonies. You need to—" But Richardson was already moving, barking orders into his comm, face set in grim lines. He needed to get back to Earth, to rally humanity's defenses. He strode towards his shuttle, not sparing the stunned council delegates a backward glance. Let them have their tainted victory. War was coming. He could only pray humanity was ready to meet it head-on. The bridge of Admiral Richardson's flagship was a hive of tense activity. The Admiral stood at the central holotable, locked in urgent communication with Earth's Defense Command. Sensor arrays had just detected a nightmarish sight, a colossal Trill war fleet, numbering in the hundreds of ships jumping into the Oort cloud at the fringes of the solar system. "They're not even trying to hide their approach," the sensor officer reported, his voice tight with stress. "They're burning hard for the inner system. ETA to Earth orbit, 4 hours. Richardson's face was carved from stone, but his eyes blazed with a fierce determination. "They mean to hit us where we live," he turned to his comms officer. "Flash priority message to all ships, rendezvous at Titan base immediately. We make our stand there." The scene shifted to the command center of Titan base, a fortress among the stars. The sprawling station bristled with enough firepower to give even the mightiest fleet pause. At its heart stood Commander Red, freshly evacuated from the chaos on the Trill moon. Around him, the command staff worked furiously to bring the base to full combat readiness. Suddenly klaxons blared as the long-range scanners lit up with contacts. "Trill Armada detected," the sensor officer yelled over the alarms. "They'll be in weapons range in minutes." On the main view screen, the human fleet moved to intercept, looking painfully small against the onrushing tide of Trill warships. Then, with a flicker of pseudo-motion, the battle was joined. Lances of energy crisscrossed the void as the two fleets tore into each other with savage fury. The human ships fought with desperate skill and courage, weaving intricate evasive patterns and concentrating their fire on the Trill's most vital ships. But for every enemy vessel that shattered under their guns, 2 more seemed to take its place. Steadily, inexorably, the human fleet was driven back. Disaster struck as a second Trill fleet tore out of hyperspace behind the human formation, catching them in a brutal pincer. On the bridge of his flagship, Richardson slammed a fist into the arm of his command chair. "It was a trap," he snarled. "The attack on the colonies, it was just bait to draw us out. They've outmaneuvered us." With a heavy heart, Richardson gave the order he'd hoped never to give. "All ships fighting retreat back to Earth orbit. We make our last stand at humanity's cradle." As the battered human fleet disengaged, the Trill turned their fury on Titan base. The station shook under a relentless barrage of missiles and energy fire, its shields flaring and fritzing under the onslaught. In the command center, Red gripped the edge of the hollow table, knuckles white. "Shields at 30%, an officer shouted over the din of exploding consoles and twisting metal. "Breaches on decks 7 through 12. Red's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "All-point defense batteries, fire at will. Keep those bastards off our hull." The station's guns roared to life, spitting streams of high-velocity metal into the Trill formation. Enemy ships shattered and spun away, trailing debris and atmosphere. But it wasn't enough. With a shudder that seemed to run through the station's very bones, the shields finally collapsed. "Trill boarding pods latching onto the hull," the sensor officer screamed. "They're breaching." Red was already moving, pulse rifle in hand, Marines falling in behind him. "All security teams, repel boarders. Hold the critical sections at all costs." What followed was a desperate, brutal battle through the corridors and chambers of Titan Base. Humans and Trill clashed in vicious close-quarters combat, the air thick with the ozone stench of energy weapons and the coppery tang of blood. In the chaos, a squad of Trill soldiers broke through to the station's reactor core. Over the din of battle, Red heard the dreaded words, "They're trying to detonate the core! They're going to blow the whole station!" Red fought his way to the reactor chamber, his Marines a tight knot of disciplined violence around him. They arrived to find the Trill already at the control console, furiously working to override the safeties. In that moment, Red knew what he had to do. With a speed born of desperation, he lunged for the emergency ejection controls. Sparks flew and alarms shrieked as he manually triggered the core's ejection sequence. The Trill soldiers roared with fury, turning their weapons on Red, but it was too late. With a bone-shaking rumble, the reactor core tore free of its moorings and hurtled into space, directly towards the heart of the Trill fleet. The resulting explosion was cataclysmic, a miniature sun blooming in the void. Dozens of Trill ships simply vanished, vaporized by the unimaginable energies unleashed. The rest reeled away, their formation shattered. Seizing the momentary reprieve, Red's voice boomed over the station's intercom. "All personnel abandon base, get to the escape pods now." As the pods jetted away from the ravaged hulk of Titan Base, the Trill regrouped and refocused their fire on the station's vital systems, determined to erase this thorn in their side. Red, aboard the last escape pod, looked back at the doomed base. He knew what he had to do. With a few deft keystrokes, he overloaded the base's remaining power systems. The resulting detonation was apocalyptic, a sphere of pure white annihilation that engulfed the station and the Trill ships nearest to it. When the glare faded, nothing remained but a slowly dissipating cloud of debris. From the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Richardson watched grimly as Titan Base vanished in a blaze of self-sacrifice. The loss was staggering, but the station and its brave defenders had bought them precious time. Time humanity would need as the Trill Armada, though bloodied, began its final push towards Earth. The battle had been lost. But the war was far from over. The battered hulls of humanity's warships hung in the void over Earth, arranged in a desperate defensive perimeter. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Richardson gripped the arms of his command chair, his face a grim mask as he watched the sensor displays. The Trill Armada, a seething mass of alien metal, bore down on the human fleet with inexorable purpose. "All ships hold formation," Richardson barked into the fleet-wide comm. "Not one damn alien sets foot on Earth." The human crews, weary and bloodied, steeled themselves for the onslaught. Weapons officers hunched over their consoles, targeting systems locked on the approaching Trill vessels. Engineers coaxed every last erg of power from battered reactors, diverting it to shields and weapons. As the Trill ships entered weapons range, space erupted in a maelstrom of fire. Lances of energy crisscrossed the void as the fleets tore into each other. The human ships fought with desperate skill, weaving intricate evasive patterns and concentrating fire on the Trill's most vital systems. But for every enemy ship that shattered under their guns, 2 more surged forward to take its place. Richardson's flagship shuddered as Trill fire hammered its shields. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks, the acrid stench of burnt circuitry filling the bridge. "Shields at 30%, the tactical officer yelled over the chaos. "Breaches on decks 12 and 15. Richardson gritted his teeth. Divert auxiliary power to shields, focus fire on their command ship. But even as his crew struggled to comply, Richardson watched in growing despair as human ships winked out on the tactical display, one by one. The Trill's overwhelming numbers were taking their toll. Proud vessels that had stood against 100 foes now drifted lifeless, hulls rent by alien weaponry. Suddenly the comm crackled to life. "Admiral Richardson," the voice was smug, dripping with disdain. "This is Ambassador Orin of the Trill hegemony." Richardson's eyes narrowed as Orin's sneering visage filled the view screen. The Trill ambassador lounged in his command chair, a predatory smile playing across his alien features. "Your fleet is in ruins, your world defenseless," Orin gloated. "Surrender now, and perhaps we will be merciful." Richardson surged to his feet, rage etched into every line of his face. "We will never surrender to you, you piece of Trill filth. We'll fight you to the last man, the last ship, the last goddamn bullet." Orin's face contorted in fury. "Then die, you primitive ape. All ships advance, burn their wretched planet to ash." And then a miracle. "Admiral!" the sensor officer cried out. "New contacts emerging from hyperspace." Richardson whirled to the display, hardly daring to hope. A fleet of unknown ships, sleek and powerful, was tearing out of the hyperspace at the edge of the battle. Their hulls gleamed with an unfamiliar alloy, their lines speaking of advanced technology beyond anything the Galactic Council races possessed. Richardson nodded, not trusting his voice. The viewscreen shifted, and he found himself staring into a grizzled, achingly familiar human face. "This is Admiral Jeremiah Stark of the Odyssey Fleet," the man said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Sorry we're late to the party." Richardson's mind reeled. The Odyssey, the legendary colony ship, lost centuries ago during the early days of human expansion, here, now, with a fleet of advanced warships at their back. "Admiral Stark," Richardson managed, his voice hoarse, I don't understand how—" Stark smiled, a sad, weary thing. "It's a long story, Admiral. The Odyssey survived, catapulted to the far reaches of the galaxy by a freak hyperspace anomaly. We found the ruins of an ancient civilization, technology beyond our wildest dreams. It took generations, but we reverse-engineered it, built a new fleet, and now we've come home to help our brothers and sisters in their hour of need." As Stark spoke, the Odyssey fleet engaged the Trill. Brilliant lances of exotic energy tore through the alien ships like a scythe through wheat. Shields flared and died under the onslaught, hulls shattering like glass. The Trill formation descended into chaos as the Odyssey ships carved a swath of destruction through their ranks. On the Trill flagship, Orin stared at the tactical display in disbelief, his face contorted with rage. The Trill fleet wheeled, trying to bring their weapons to bear on the Odyssey ships. But they were outmatched, their technology woefully inferior. The Odyssey ships danced through their formation, advanced shields shrugging off return fire, powerful weapons systematically dismantling the Trill fleet. "It's working," Richardson's tactical officer crowed. "The Trill, they're breaking." Richardson allowed himself a fierce grin. The battle was far from over. The Trill still vastly outnumbered them. But for the first time since this nightmare began, he felt a flicker of hope. With Odyssey at their side, they had a fighting chance. They could win this. But as he watched the titanic space battle unfold, a nagging thought tugged at the back of Richardson's mind. The Odyssey fleet's sudden appearance, their advanced technology, it all seemed a bit too convenient. A deus ex machina, arriving in humanity's darkest hour. He shook off the thought, gift horses and all that. Right now they had a battle to win, a world to save. The questions could wait. On the viewscreen, Orin's face was a mask of apoplectic rage as his fleet crumbled around him. Richardson smiled coldly, keying the comm. "Still want our surrender, Ambassador?" he asked, his voice laced with icy contempt. "Or are you ready to turn tail and run?" Orin's reply was a wordless snarl of fury. The Trill flagship wheeled, disengaging from the battle, fleeing towards the hyperlimit with the tattered remnants of its fleet. Richardson watched them go, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over him. They had won the day, Earth was safe, but the war was far from over. Orin and his Trill masters would be back with a vengeance. And when they came, Richardson vowed, humanity would be ready to fight, ready to win, no matter the cost. Amidst the titanic space battle raging above Earth, Admiral Richardson's comm crackled to life. "Admiral!" a frantic voice called. "Urgent message from the surface!" Richardson's brow furrowed as he patched the transmission through. Dr. Elias Prescott's face, haggard and smudged with grime, flickered onto the view screen. "Admiral Richardson, thank God I reached you. I've made a breakthrough, a way to retrofit our ships with Odyssey hyperspace tech. It could change everything." Richardson leaned forward, a glimmer of hope kindling in his eyes. "Doctor, are you certain?" "Positive," Prescott said. "But I need extraction. The Trill, they're closing in on my position." Richardson made a snap decision. "Hold tight, Doctor. I'm coming for you myself." As Richardson prepped a strike team, the battle outside intensified. Trill ships swarmed the Odyssey fleet, threatening to overwhelm them through sheer numbers. On the Odyssey flagship bridge, Admiral Stark gritted his teeth as his ship shuddered under enemy fire. "Status report!" he barked. Stark's eyes narrowed as he watched Richardson's shuttle dart towards Earth's surface. He knew what he had to do. "All ships, execute Plan Omega. Draw the Trill away from Earth." The Odyssey fleet suddenly broke formation, splitting into smaller wolf packs. They engaged their advanced drives, zipping away at impossible speeds. The Trill, caught off guard, scrambled to pursue. Soon the void lit up with dazzling explosions, as the Odyssey ships led the Trill on a deadly game of cat and mouse through the solar system. They danced amidst the rings of Saturn, traded fire in the frozen shadows of Uranus, played a lethal game of hide-and-seek in the asteroid belt. Back on Earth, Richardson's shuttle screamed through the atmosphere, anti-aircraft fire peppering its shields. It touched down in the ruined streets of a once thriving city, now a war-torn hellscape. "Let's move," Richardson ordered as his team disembarked, pulse rifles at the ready. They advanced cautiously through the rubble-strewn streets, the eerie silence punctuated by distant explosions and the crackle of gunfire. Suddenly energy bolts sizzled past their heads. "Contact!" Sergeant Hawkins yelled, diving for cover. Trill soldiers had emerged from the ruins, their black armor glistening in the wan light. Richardson's team returned fire, the air thick with the ozone tang of energy weapons. They leapfrogged from cover to cover, trading shots with the entrenched Trill. "Push forward," Richardson roared over the din of battle. "We're almost at the dock's location." The team redoubled their efforts, pulse rifles barking, grenades detonating in thunderous concussions. They reached Prescott's lab, only to find it swarming with Trill shock troops. "Breach and clear," Richardson ordered, slapping a breaching charge on the reinforced door. The charge detonated with a concussive whump, blowing the door off its hinges. Richardson's team stormed in, gunning down surprised Trill soldiers. In the chaos, Richardson spotted Prescott, huddled behind an overturned desk. "Doctor, we need to move now." Prescott nodded, his face pale but determined. He clutched a data drive to his chest. "This is it, Admiral. Everything we need to upgrade our ships." As they fought their way back to the extraction point, Prescott explained his breakthrough, a way to miniaturize Odyssey hyperdrives, allowing even the smallest fighter to outmaneuver the Trill. But the victory was bittersweet. Several of Richardson's men lay unmoving on the blood-slicked floor, their lives given in defense of humanity's future. With Prescott and his data secure, Richardson's shuttle blasted off, punching through the atmosphere. In orbit, they found the Odyssey fleet triumphant, the Trill in full retreat. Richardson immediately transmitted Prescott's data to the remnants of the human fleet. Engineers swarmed over the ships, retrofitting them with the new hyperdrives. In the void, the fleeing Trill suddenly found themselves facing a new human fleet, one that could dance circles around their lumbering warships. Admiral Stark, a predatory grin on his face, ordered the pursuit. The upgraded human ships tore into the Trill formation, zipping in and out of weapons range at impossible speeds. The Trill returned fire frantically, but their shots went wide, unable to track the nimble human craft. One by one, Trill ships succumbed to the onslaught, hulls breached, reactors detonating in titanic explosions. The once mighty Trill armada was reduced to a scattering of battered survivors limping towards the hyperspace limit. On the bridge of his flagship, Orrin slammed a fist into his console as he watched his fleet disintegrate. His face was a mask of rage and disbelief. "This is impossible," he snarled. "Primitive apes cannot defeat the Trill." But even as he spoke, warning alarms blared. Admiral Richardson's voice boomed over the calm, cold and implacable. "This is Admiral Philip Richardson of the Earth Defense Fleet. Surrender now and your lives will be spared." Orrin's eyes bulged, apoplectic fury warring with the cold reality of his situation. His ship shuddered as human weapons pounded its failing shields. Through gritted teeth he ground out a single word: "Never." With a final defiant roar, Orrin overloaded his ship's reactors. The resulting explosion consumed his ship, a miniature supernova that briefly outshone the sun. As the glare faded, Richardson stared at the expanding field of debris that had once been the pride of the Trill fleet. A heavy silence hung on the bridge. It was broken by a comm from Admiral Stark. "Well done, Admiral Richardson. Thanks to you and Dr. Prescott, humanity has a fighting chance." Richardson nodded wearily. "But the war isn't over. The Trill will be back with a vengeance." "And we'll be ready for them," Stark replied, steel in his voice. "Humanity doesn't stand alone anymore." Richardson allowed himself a small, grim smile. The odds were still stacked against them, but with Earth and Odyssey standing together, they would face those odds as one. One species, one people, one unbreakable alliance. The battle had been won, but the war for humanity's survival had only just begun. Back on Earth, Richardson and his strike team battled through the war-torn streets, energy bolts sizzling past their heads as they advanced towards the secure communications facility. Trill soldiers poured fire from the shattered windows of bombed-out buildings, their weapons spitting deadly plasma. "Keep moving!" Richardson roared over the chaos, his rifle barking as he put down a Trill sniper. "We're almost there." They fought their way into the facility, securing the perimeter with ruthless efficiency. Dr. Prescott rushed to the communications console, his fingers flying over the keys as he uploaded his precious data to the human fleet's network. "Data uploaded," Prescott announced triumphantly. "They should be able to start retrofitting the ships immediately." In the orbital shipyards, technicians swarmed over the battered human vessels, working feverishly to integrate Dr. Prescott's hyperspace modifications. Sparks flew, and metal shrieked as they raced against time, knowing that every minute counted. Within hours, the first upgraded ships were ready. Richardson, not one to ask his men to do what he wouldn't, took command of a sleek, agile frigate, the HNS Retribution. Sliding into the command chair, he felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could turn the tide. "All ships, this is Admiral Richardson," he said into the fleet-wide comm. "Form up on me. We're going to show these Trill bastards what humans are made of." The modified ships, a motley assortment of frigates, destroyers, and light cruisers, fell into formation behind the Retribution. Richardson, his face set in grim determination, gave the order. The human fleet winked out of Earth's orbit, reappearing amidst the Trill armada in a dazzling flash of pseudo-motion. Before the Trill could react, Richardson's ships were among them, weapons blazing. The Retribution danced through the Trill formation, its new hyperspace drive allowing it to blink in and out of existence, striking and fading like a phantom. Richardson targeted a massive Trill battleship, his pulse cannons ripping into its hull, leaving gaping, molten wounds. All around, the other human ships were wreaking similar havoc, appearing and disappearing faster than the Trill could track. The lumbering Trill warships, built for brute force rather than agility, struggled to bring their guns to bear on the elusive human vessels. On the bridge of his crippled flagship, Orin watched in disbelief as his fleet was torn apart by this new human tactic. His ships were being decimated, their hulls breached, their crews slaughtered. It was like trying to fight ghosts. "Thal ships, retreat!" Orin snarled into the comm, his pride stinging at the words. "Fall back to Trill space." As the battered Trill fleet limped away from Earth, their once proud ships reduced to smoking wrecks, Richardson allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They had done it. They had beaten back the Trill, at least for now. But even as he savored the victory, a new distress call came in. It was from the Galactic Council delegation, the ones who had been with him on the Trill moon. In the chaos of the battle, they had been forgotten, left behind in the ruins of the Trill base. Richardson hesitated, weighing the risks. The Trill moon was deep in enemy territory, likely still crawling with Trill soldiers. Going back would be a huge gamble. But he also knew that rescuing the council delegates could be a game-changer. If he could save them, bring them back to safety, it could sway the council to humanity's side, isolate the Trill diplomatically. The Retribution, accompanied by a hand-picked team of elite Marines, made the jump to the Trill moon, appearing in low orbit over the blasted landscape. Richardson led the Marines down in a dropship, the craft shuddering as it punched through the moon's thin atmosphere. They touched down near the ruins of the Trill base, the dropship's ramp slamming down into the dust. Richardson was the first one out, his boots crunching on the rubble, his rifle sweeping for targets. The base was a shattered husk, its once gleaming structures reduced to twisted metal and shattered stone. Smoke still rose from the devastation wrought by Red's sabotage mission. Richardson and his Marines moved cautiously through the ruins, the eerie silence broken only by the crunch of their footsteps and the occasional crackle of settling debris. They expected an ambush at any moment, knowing that the Trill garrison, though likely depleted, would not give up their base without a fight. Suddenly, a burst of plasma fire erupted from a collapsed watchtower, sizzling past Richardson's head. The Marines dove for cover, returning fire as Trill soldiers emerged from the rubble, their black armor blending with the shadows. A fierce firefight erupted amidst the ruins, energy bolts crisscrossing the dust-choked air. Richardson and his Marines fought with cool precision, leapfrogging from cover to cover, steadily advancing towards the council delegates' last known position. They found the delegates huddled in a half-collapsed bunker, their once pristine robes filthy and torn. Among them was Orin, the Trill ambassador, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. As Richardson approached, Orin surged to his feet, his eyes flashing with hatred. "You," he spat, jabbing a finger at Richardson. "This is all your fault, you and your accursed species. You've ruined everything." "We didn't start this war, Ambassador," he said evenly. "You did when you decided to build that doomsday weapon, when you tried to bully and intimidate us. We're just finishing what you started." Orin's face contorted in fury. "Lies!" he screamed. "You humans are the aggressors. You've always been jealous of our superiority, our power. This was just an excuse for you to attack us." Richardson shook his head, a mix of pity and disgust on his face. "You still don't get it, do you? This was never about power or superiority. This was about survival. You threaten our existence, and we will fight back. Every time." Orin seemed to deflate, his rage giving way to a kind of manic desperation. His eyes darted to a fallen Trill soldier, to the plasma rifle lying inches from the corpse's outflung hand. The Trill ambassador collapsed, his hands clutching at the smoking hole in his chest. He looked up at Richardson, his eyes wide with shock and pain. "Chosen, you—" he gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. Orin tried to speak, but only a wet, choking sound emerged. Then he shuddered, his body going slack, his eyes staring sightlessly at the stars. Richardson holstered his weapon, turning to the stunned council delegates. "Come on," he said wearily. "Let's get you out of here." As they boarded the dropship, the delegates, even the non-humans, looked at Richardson with a newfound respect. They had seen firsthand the lengths to which he would go to protect his people, the burdens he was willing to shoulder. The dropship lifted off, leaving the blasted ruins of the Trill base behind. Richardson sat in silence, gazing out the viewport at the receding moon. Orin's death weighed on him, but he knew it had been necessary. The Trill ambassador had been too far gone, too consumed by his own hatreds. There had been no other way. But even as he wrestled with the moral weight of his actions, Richardson knew that this was just the beginning. Orin might be gone, but there would be others like him, other enemies who would seek to destroy or subjugate humanity. The war was far from over. As the dropship docked with the Retribution, Richardson squared his shoulders, preparing himself for the fights to come. Whatever threats the galaxy held, whatever challenges lay ahead, he would be ready. In the aftermath of the Trill's defeat, the shattered hulks of their warships drifting lifelessly in Earth's orbit, Admiral Richardson stood on the bridge of his flagship, his gaze fixed on the viewscreen. The image of Earth, battered but unbroken, filled the display, a testament to humanity's resilience in the face of annihilation. But even as he savored this hard-won victory, Richardson's mind was already racing ahead, grappling with the implications of humanity's newfound power. The advanced technology of the Odyssey fleet, combined with Dr. Prescott's hyperspace breakthrough, had shifted the galactic balance in a seismic way. Humanity now possessed capabilities beyond anything the other races could muster. In the corridors of power on Earth, this realization was causing a stir. As Richardson made his way to an emergency meeting of Earth's leadership, he could feel the tension crackling in the air. In the conference room, the debate was already in full swing. "This is our chance," Admiral Tanaka pounded the table, his face flushed with passion. "We can ensure that humanity will never again be at the mercy of an alien aggressor. We must use this power to establish our dominance, to make it clear that any attack on humanity will be met with swift and overwhelming force." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Many of the assembled leaders, still reeling from the devastation of the Trill assault, found Tanaka's argument seductive. The prospect of an unassailable human hegemony, of never again having to fear the specter of invasion, was tempting. But Richardson, his expression thoughtful, raised a hand. The room fell silent as he began to speak. "I understand the appeal of Admiral Tanaka's proposal," he said, his voice measured, "but I fear that such a path would lead us into the very darkness we've just fought so hard to escape." He leaned forward, his gaze sweeping the room. "The Trill attacked us out of fear and mistrust. They saw our growing strength as a threat to be eliminated. If we now use our power to dominate the galaxy, to bend the other races to our will, are we not becoming the very thing we despise?" Richardson paused, letting his words sink in. "I propose a different path. Let us use our strength not to conquer, but to lead. Let us forge a new era of galactic cooperation and peace." The room erupted into a hubbub of voices, some incredulous, some intrigued. Richardson pressed on. "We have a chance to reshape the very fabric of galactic relations, to create a future where the races of the galaxy stand together, united in common purpose. It won't be easy. It will require diplomacy, compromise, and a willingness to let go of old enmities. But I believe it is a future worth fighting for." As the debate raged on, Richardson could sense the mood of the room shifting. His vision, though challenging, was striking a chord. When the vote was finally called, the result was clear. Earth would extend the hand of friendship to the galaxy. The scene shifted to the gleaming halls of the Galactic Council, where Richardson stood before the assembled delegates. The atmosphere was tense, the scars of the recent conflict still raw. "Esteemed members of the Council," Richardson began, his voice ringing clear, "I come to you today not as a conqueror, but as a friend. Humanity has developed technology that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy, but we do not seek to hoard this power for ourselves." He paused, letting his gaze sweep the room. "Instead, we offer to share our advancements with all races, freely and without reservation. We ask only one thing in return, that you join us in forging a new era of peace and cooperation. that you sign a treaty of mutual non-aggression and collective security, binding us together in common cause." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly at first, but with growing momentum, the delegates began to speak. Some voiced doubts, seeing in humanity's offer the spectre of human domination under a veiled guise. But others, led by the delegates Richardson had rescued from the Trill Moon, spoke passionately in support of the proposal. "I have seen firsthand the character of this man," the Zephyri delegate said, gesturing to Richardson. "In our darkest hour, he risked everything to save us. Not for advantage or glory, but because it was the right thing to do. If he says humanity seeks partnership, not conquest, I believe him." As the debate continued, the tide began to turn. More and more delegates spoke in favor of the treaty, of seizing this chance for a lasting peace. But even as the momentum built, a new crisis was brewing. In a shadowed corner of the Trill delegation, a figure slipped away, his face twisted with rage. General Zoltar, mastermind of the secret weapons project and architect of the war, had no intention of accepting peace. If the Trill government was too weak to finish what they'd started, he would do it himself. As the council moved towards a vote, Zoltar was already in motion. With a cadre of loyal soldiers, he stormed a Trill military base, seizing control of a fleet of advanced warships. By the time the alarm was raised, he was already gone, his ships disappearing into hyperspace. Branded a renegade by his own government, Zoltar set his sights on the fragile peace taking shape. He would disrupt the negotiations by any means necessary, starting with the neutral world of Velura, where the talks were entering their final phase. As diplomats from 100 worlds gathered on Velura, working feverishly to hammer out the details of the treaty, Zoltar's fleet materialized in the skies above. Without warning or mercy, they opened fire, raining devastation on the unsuspecting planet. In the chaos of the attack, Richardson found himself once again on the front lines. As the buildings shook and crumbled around him, he rallied the planet's defenses, leading a desperate fight to hold back Zoltar's onslaught. But even Richardson's skill and determination could only hold the line for so long against the renegade's superior firepower. With a heavy heart, he activated his comm, knowing there was only one hope left. "Admiral Stark," he said, his voice steady despite the destruction raging around him. "The peace talks are under attack. We need the Odyssey fleet, and we need it now." There was only a moment's pause before Stark's reply crackled through. "We're on our way, Richardson. Hold fast, Odyssey is coming." High above Velura, space itself seemed to warp and twist, then shatter like glass as the Odyssey fleet tore into real space, weapons already blazing. The renegade Trill ships, caught off guard by the suddenness of the attack, scrambled to respond. What followed was a battle unlike any the galaxy had seen. The Odyssey ships, their advanced technology, a match even for Zoltar's stolen fleet, danced through the Trill formation with deadly grace. Zoltar's ships fought back with the ferocity of cornered beasts, knowing that retreat was not an option. On the planet's surface, Richardson led a desperate defense of the capital city. Street by street, building by building, his forces clashed with Zoltar's ground troops in a brutal urban melee. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of burning metal as energy weapons sizzled, and tanks rumbled through the rubble-strewn avenues. Amidst the chaos, a figure emerged from the smoke, General Zoltar himself, his eyes blazing with hate. He raised his weapon, aiming directly at Richardson. "You," he snarled, "you've ruined everything. Humanity was supposed to kneel before the might of the Trill." The two warriors charged each other, weapons forgotten as they clashed in a furious hand-to-hand duel. They traded blows amidst the rubble, each seeking to end the other, to end the war once and for all. In the end, it was Richardson who prevailed. With a final desperate effort, he knocked Zoltar to the ground, his blaster coming to rest against the renegade's chest. Zoltar, beaten and bloody, looked up at Richardson with a mixture of hatred and something almost like respect. "Finish it," he spat. "You've won." Around them, the battle was waning. With their leader fallen, the fight seemed to go out of the renegade Trill. Those who could fled, their ships scattering into hyperspace. Those who remained laid down their arms, surrendering to the victorious human and Odyssey forces. In the aftermath, as the smoke cleared and the wounds began to heal, the delegates reconvened. The attack, rather than derailing the peace process, seemed to have galvanized it. The shared threat, the common fight, had forged a new sense of unity among the disparate races. With a renewed sense of purpose, the delegates finalized the treaty, a comprehensive pact of non-aggression, mutual defense, and technological sharing. As the signatures were affixed, a palpable sense of hope filled the chamber. A new era was dawning, a future of peace and cooperation. And at the center of it all stood Admiral Richardson, the man who had led the charge, who had risked everything for the chance at a better tomorrow. As he stood before the cheering delegates, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders, Richardson allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. There would be challenges ahead, obstacles to overcome. But for now, in this moment, there was peace. And that was enough. In the grand chambers of the Galactic Council, applause thundered as the delegates rose one by one to signal their assent. Richardson stood at the center of the hall, his face a mix of exhaustion and elation. The war was over. The peace, hard fought and hard won, was finally at hand. But even as the ink dried on the treaty, trouble was brewing. On the Trill homeworld, the once unified people found themselves splintering. The moderates, led by the newly minted Ambassador Jan, embraced the peace and the promise of a new era of cooperation. But the hardliners, the remnants of Zoltar's faction seethed with resentment. They saw the peace as a betrayal, a surrender of Trill pride and power. As tension simmered, Ambassador Jan made a desperate plea to the Galactic Council. "We need help," he said, his voice strained. "The hardliners are entrenched, and they're pushing us to the brink of civil war. We can't do this alone." Richardson, hailed across the galaxy as the architect of the peace, stepped forward. "I'll go," he said, his voice firm with resolve. "I'll lead a diplomatic mission to Trill. We'll find a way to bridge this divide." But when Richardson's shuttle touched down in the Trill capital, he found a city on the edge. In the streets, protesters clashed with riot police. Blaster fire echoed through the alleyways as hardliner militias skirmished with government forces. The moderates clung to power, but their grip was slipping. Richardson wasted no time. He convened an emergency summit, bringing the leaders of both factions to the negotiating table. The talks were tense, the air thick with acrimony. The hardliners, led by the firebrand General Kresh, were obstinate. They demanded concessions, power, a return to the old ways. Richardson, his patience fraying, finally slammed his fist on the table. The room fell silent. "Enough," he growled. "This ends now. You're tearing your world apart, and for what? Pride, power? It's time to move forward." He laid out his proposal, a power-sharing agreement, a unity government with both factions represented. "You can work together," he urged. "You can build a new Trill, a stronger Trill." General Kresh, his eyes narrowed, leaned forward. "And why should we trust you, human? Why should we trust any of you?" Richardson met his gaze unflinchingly. "Because we're all in this together now, human, Trill, Zephyri, it doesn't matter. We're all part of something bigger." Finally, as dawn broke over the smoke-shrouded capital, a deal was struck. The hardliners, realizing they were outmatched and outmaneuvered, grudgingly agreed to the power-sharing arrangement. A new government would be formed, with Ambassador Jan and General Kresh as co-leaders. Richardson, his work on Trill seemingly done, prepared to depart. But as he boarded his shuttle, an urgent message came through. A human colony far on the frontier was under attack. The distress call was garbled, the attackers unknown. But one thing was clear. The colony would not hold out for long. Richardson hesitated, torn. He had a duty to see the Trill peace process through, but he also had a duty to his fellow humans, to the innocent colonists crying out for help. In the end, there was no choice. Richardson called in every favor, pulled every string. Within hours, a makeshift task force was assembled. Ships from a dozen worlds, crewed by a rainbow of species, all united in common cause. Among them, to Richardson's surprise, was a contingent of Trill ships, led by none other than Ambassador Jan. "We stand with you," Jan said, clasping Richardson's hand, "in peace and in war." The task force leaped into hyperspace, racing towards the besieged colony. As they dropped into real space at the colony's coordinates, they were met with a sight of devastation. The colony's defenses, once thought impregnable, were in ruins, and swarming over the wreckage was a fleet of alien ships, unlike anything Richardson had ever seen. The aliens were insectoid, their ships a nightmarish fusion of organic and mechanical components. They moved with eerie coordination, as if guided by a single, implacable will. Richardson didn't hesitate. He ordered the task force to engage, and the battle was joined. It was a fight unlike any other, the motley alliance of ships facing off against the implacable insectoid horde. The aliens' technology was advanced, their tactics ruthless. But the task force had something the invaders did not, the indomitable human spirit and the unbreakable bonds of friendship forged in the crucible of war. Ship by ship, the insectoid fleet was driven back, their hulls shattered by the combined might of a dozen species, and when the last alien ship fled into hyperspace, a cheer went up from the task force. The colony was saved, the day was won. But even as the cheers echoed across the comms, a chill settled over Richardson, for the sensors were clear. This was merely a scouting force, a vanguard of something much larger. Somewhere out there, beyond the reaches of known space, a new threat was gathering, an implacable foe bent on conquest and domination. In the halls of the Galactic Council, an emergency session was convened. The chamber buzzed with tension as delegates from 100 worlds took their seats. At the center of the room, a holographic display flickered to life, casting an eerie glow over the assembled faces. It showed a vast armada of insectoid ships, their chitinous hulls glinting in the starlight, advancing inexorably towards the heart of galactic civilization. Fleet Admiral Richardson, his uniform crisp and his face set in grim lines, stepped forward. "Esteemed members of the Council," he began, his voice carrying through the chamber, "we face an existential threat. The insectoid race, previously unknown to us, has launched a full-scale invasion. Their numbers are vast, their technology advanced, and their intentions hostile." The display shifted, showing scenes of devastation. Worlds burned, their surfaces scoured by alien weaponry. Refugee fleets clogged the hyperlanes, fleeing in desperate search of safety. "We must stand together," Richardson continued, his fist clenched. "Every ship, every soldier, every resource we have must be mobilized to meet this threat. Failure is not an option. If we fall, the galaxy falls with us." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices, delegates shouting over each other in a dozen languages. Some called for negotiation, others for immediate retaliation. But through the din, a consensus emerged. The Galactic Council would fight. The scene shifted to the bridge of the Unity, Richardson's flagship. The Admiral stood at the holotable, his eyes locked on the tactical display. Around him, the bridge crew worked with focused intensity, coordinating the movements of 1,000 ships. "Enemy fleet dropping out of hyperspace," the sensor officer reported, her voice taut. Sir, they're everywhere." The display lit up with a swarm of red markers, each one an insectoid warship. They outnumbered the Allied forces by a staggering margin, their formation a vast encircling cloud. Richardson's jaw tightened. "All ships engage at will. Concentrate fire on their command vessels. We have to disrupt their coordination." The battle was joined, the void lighting up with the fury of 1,000 suns. The Allied ships fought with desperate valor, their weapons slicing into the insectoid hulls, their crews pouring heart and soul into every shot. And for a time, it seemed they might prevail. But the insectoids were relentless. For every ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. They adapted to every tactic, every weapon, every desperate ploy. Slowly, inexorably, they began to push the Allies back. "We're losing ground," Richardson's first officer said, his face grim. "They're cutting through our lines like a plasma torch through butter." Richardson stared at the tactical display, watching the red tide sweep over system after system. Worlds that had stood for millennia fell in days, their populations enslaved or exterminated. The Allied forces, for all their courage and sacrifice, were being whittled away. In that moment, Richardson knew what he had to do. It was a gamble, a desperate roll of the dice, but if it worked, it could change everything. "Summon my strike team," he ordered, his voice like steel. "And get me Dr. Prescott on the line. We're going to take this fight to the enemy." The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Using Dr. Prescott's hyperspace technology, Richardson's team would jump deep into insectoid space, bypassing their defenses and striking at the heart of their command. It was a mission from which there might be no return. But the alternative was unthinkable. As the strike team assembled in the Unity's hangar bay, Richardson looked over the faces of his chosen few. There was Commander Red, his oldest friend and most trusted officer, Captain Chen, the finest pilot in the fleet, and Ambassador Jan, the trill diplomat who had become an unlikely ally and a true friend. Richardson clasped each of their hands in turn, a final wordless farewell. Then, with a nod to the flight crew, he boarded his ship. The sleek black craft, a fusion of human and Odyssey technology, hummed with power as it lifted off the deck and slipped into the void. The jump through hyperspace was a blur of light and motion, the stars stretching into infinite lines. Then, with a sudden gut-wrenching lurch, they were through. The insectoid command ship loomed before them, a monstrous construct of glistening metal and pulsing organic tissue. Its hull was alive with the flicker of energy shields and the glow of weapon ports, a fortress bristling with menace. Richardson's team struck like lightning, their ship dancing through the defensive fire, their weapons finding every chink and gap in the enemy's armor. They blasted their way into the heart of the vessel, storming through corridors choked with insectoid warriors. The fighting was fierce and desperate, a close-quarters melee of flashing blades and searing energy beams. Richardson and his team fought like demons, cutting down the insectoid guards in droves. But for every one they killed, two more took their place, an endless tide of chitinous bodies. Jan fell first, his body shattered by a massive insectoid guard. He died saving Richardson, leaping in front of a killing blow meant for the Admiral. Richardson caught him as he fell, cradling his broken form, tears stinging his eyes. Red and Chen fought on, their weapons blazing, their faces set in masks of grim determination. But one by one, they too were overwhelmed, dragged down by the sheer weight of numbers. In the end, only Richardson remained, standing alone in the heart of the enemy ship, and before him, rising from a throne of twisted metal, was the insectoid queen. She was a thing of nightmare, a vast bloated creature with 1,000 eyes and 100 grasping limbs. Her voice, when she spoke, was a buzzing screech that filled Richardson's mind with a terrible pressure. "You fight well, human," she said, her tone mocking. "But your struggle is futile. We are the swarm, the hive. We consume, we assimilate, we grow. It is our nature, our destiny." Richardson raised his weapon, his finger tightening on the trigger, but the Queen only laughed. "Kill me and another will take my place. The swarm is eternal, but submit and your worlds will be spared. Your people will become a part of something greater." For a moment Richardson wavered. The weight of countless lives hung in the balance. Could he condemn them all for the sake of defiance? But then he thought of Jan, of Red, of Chen, of all those who had fought and died for the right to be free. And he knew what he had to do. "No," he said, his voice like thunder. "We will never submit. We will fight you to the last breath, the last ship, the last atom of our being, because a life without freedom is no life at all." And with those words he detonated the explosives. The world turned white, then red, then black. The last thing Richardson saw was the Queen's face, contorted in a scream of rage and pain. Then the darkness took him, and he knew no more. In the void above the Allied worlds, the insectoid fleet reeled as if struck. Ships spun out of formation, colliding and exploding. Warriors twitched and convulsed, their hive mind thrown into chaos by the loss of their queen. The Allied forces, seizing the moment, surged forward in a final desperate charge. They tore into the disorganized insectoids, their weapons finding every weakness, every flaw, and slowly, painfully, they began to push the invaders back. It was a victory hard-won and bitter. The insectoids were broken, their invasion thwarted, but the cost had been immense. Countless worlds lay in ruin, their populations decimated, and Admiral Richardson, the hero who had made it all possible, was gone, lost in the heart of the enemy. In the aftermath, as the galaxy began the long, slow process of rebuilding, the legend of Richardson only grew. Some said he had survived, that he was out there somewhere, still fighting for the cause of freedom. Others whispered that he had ascended, becoming a guardian spirit watching over the Allied worlds. But to those who had known him, who had fought beside him, Richardson would always be remembered as a man who had given everything, who had sacrificed all for the sake of others, a man who had shown the galaxy the true meaning of courage, of unity, of hope. And as the Allied worlds forged ahead into an uncertain future, they did so with the memory of Richardson burning bright in their hearts, a beacon guiding them through the darkness towards a brighter tomorrow. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.